in studio this morning is Marshfield Police Chief Rick Gramza, who avails himself to your phone calls and comments here on the second Friday of the month on WDLB radio. Well, yesterday I asked the guys, they were doing a fundraiser from the fire department over at McDonald's, and I said, did you get a lot of calls? He said, no, that's mostly PD stuff. He said, unless there's somebody runs a stop sign or slides through one out in the country and gets T-boned and gets into an accident somewhere, it's mostly just running into poles and sliding out of driveways and into other cars. And I suppose you had a fair share of that yesterday.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad, but I think we're unfortunately into that time of the season where people, where it's cold and icy and everything. But I mean, people are more cautious. They try to take it easy. But yeah, I mean, with the almost a flash freeze that we had yesterday, and just that sleet that came down and then froze instantaneously. I mean, there's still quite a few icy spots out there, so we recommend being cautious and careful. Yet, yeah, give yourself some extra time. But it wasn't bad. I mean, we've trained ourselves well. I think we start our winter driving in September around here, I believe. So you know, September through May, I think, is winter driving conditions. So I mean, it's we're actually probably have more accidents when it's nice and sunny out, and you know, we're driving too slow because of how we're conditioned. But no, it wasn't bad.
It always amazes me that on traffic signal lights, on corners, intersections that have traffic signals, and sunshiny days, accidents happen at a rate that you might be surprised. Last night I was motoring along in a main thoroughfares of Marshfield, and I just thought, wait a minute, you better slow down, because it was in pretty good shape last night.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, the street crews did the best they could, obviously with the icy conditions. You know, and it frosted a little bit last night to kind of ice things up again, but the sun's working on the salt in the vehicles. The more they drive over it, I think the better the conditions are getting.
There are some intersections in the city where you're on a grade. That I'm coming down and I'm thinking, oh, maybe I should have slowed up a little bit back there, because by the time I get down here, there's not much chance.
You're gonna be sideways by the time you stop.
Well, you come down, you're coming east on Adler and back to the community center, and you don't realize there's a grade that goes down to Oak.
Yep.
Or on Oak by Veterans. Yep. You know, there's a grade there, and you start applying the brakes, you go, wait, a little bit more momentum here than on the flat. So there are some spots in this city where. And of course, McMillan is always a tough one, because it's
McMillan and Upham.
Pretty good grade there as you go up on the east side of Marshfield.
Yeah, one of the nice things is they'll have, you know, based on the street crews, routes of travel. I mean, there's some of those heavier use thoroughfares, and the ones around the schools are considered those heavier use areas, so those get the most attention. So when we have icy days like yesterday, or just slippery conditions on any day, those areas, you know, with those grades, or you know, near that school traffic or around the hospital, are going to get the first attention.
Well, yesterday was Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. Did you get a box of the obligatory donuts from somebody somewhere?
We had lots of treats delivered. There was a couple of businesses in town that made really nice offers. I think Big B Coffee was giving away free beverages to officers, or so it didn't even have to be a sworn officer. Hewitt Meats offered a half-price lunch for officers and police staff. So yeah, there's a couple other local businesses that made kind of goodwill offers to us just to show their appreciation, and we appreciate it back. I mean, it's nice just to have that partnership and that connection with the community. It makes us feel one with the community.
Well, if people didn't know, you go out of your way too to go the other way. In other words, like at the wine walk, you would provide
yeah, we did the community appreciation.
The food for people, you know, get the meat and the grill and cook some things up, and people walking downtown can stop by and have a free lunch.
Yeah, our police association, our benevolent association, does really well giving back to the community in ways. You know, there's a promotional concert, or like a fundraising concert that's going to be happening in May. Johnny Cash, I guess impersonator is, I don't know the other word for it, but you know, and the proceeds that come out of that are actually given back to the community, you know, to support Big Brothers Big Sisters, Pathway Partners, Hannah Center, PDC, Mary's Place. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, and just trying to help with their successes in the community. And so we work with different promotional companies such as this to raise money to then turn back and give that back into the community.
Well, that's one of those things that I want people to understand it's real. Because there are people who call. I had a guy tell me the other day, I got a call from Wyoming wanting me for the highway patrol or the deputies out there to give money to their. Why would I give to Wyoming? And you don't know if it's.
And could. And one thing that I think we listed in this posting here on Facebook was if you're curious or cautious or reluctant to give on, through a phone call or give your credit card information away, or the nice thing about this group that we work with is they'll just send you something in the mail and you can pay however you feel deemed appropriate, to the point where you could even drop it off at the police department, and we'll make sure that the money, obviously it has to be accounted for on their end before we get dispersed our portion of it, but yeah, there's ways to do it to where, to safeguard, to give people more security as it relates to this. But there are a lot of hoax companies out there, companies that, or individuals who are trying to cheat you out of your money and use it, not for this, but they'll say that it's for this. So we just wanted to get this information out, so that, yeah, there's going to be a concert in May, Johnny Cash concert. It's held at the high school, and proceeds from that do get turned back into the community and help the community out in ways that we allocate that money.
And that's one of those things that even you talk about mailing, and I think to myself, well, they could easily, because I get mailing too, that's paperwork that looks with official looking headers on the pages that looks real. Yep. So I wouldn't be surprised. I would probably come down to the law enforcement center and do it that way ahead of time. Yeah,
that's one way that we'll often offer that, is just for them to come down and to drop that off here, and then we'll have somebody from this Encore Promotions actually stop by and pick up that money as well. So there's ways to help with that security component of it, just to make it give some peace of mind.
Tells you a little bit about the world we live in, when even the police you don't trust. As far as fundraising is concerned.
Right, exactly.
They've been spoofed before to where people have done this. Yeah. So, in different parts of the country. So, if you don't believe it, you don't have to give.
Right.
But, it hurts your cause because people become suspicious.
Right. Yeah, unfortunately everyone falls victim to that, from phone calls to mailings, to people knocking on your door even. We can live in this, heightened state of awareness, which is good, but we don't want it to completely morph the way that we would, live our lives. So there's a balance, and it's a matter of finding your own comfort level and your own comfort balance with that, and that's why we try to give more options as far as, you don't just have to give a credit card over the phone. You don't just have to write a check, which has a lot of identifying information on it. There's, you can drop it off. You can, you can choose to give locally, in person, as opposed to sending it to Wyoming or another outlet such as that.
Talking with Marshfield Police Chief Rick Gramza, you can too. 384-2191, live here the second Friday of the month of January on AM 1450 WDLB's Insight program. Talking about the police association, you guys do work throughout the year. Do you still sell garbage bags, or was that? I know for a while I bought some, but
we do. We don't have an event like we used to. There used to be a mass calling, and you would order your bags, and it was kind of
I thought there was a trailer at Festival Foods at one time.
Yeah. One of our officers donated their trailer for a weekend, and we would sell out of that. And I think we would include a $5 off coupon in either the Buyer's Guide or the News Herald or something. But now we've figured it's just as easy we sell them at a discounted rate, more so than what it used to be when we used to deliver the garbage bags. We sell them at a discounted rate, and we buy them in bulk, and we just keep a supply on hand. The police association keeps a supply on hand right at the police department, so you can pretty much come down any, Monday through Friday between 7:30 and 4:30, and just buy the bags pretty much year round.
That's good to know, because when I'm out, and I'm thinking,
Right.
well, I have to wait until I see them again, and suddenly I don't see them again.
Yeah. No, I'd even be happy to deliver a box right here to the radio station for you. I'll do that for you.
Yeah.
If you need garbage
They'll be
bags,
back
I
the
don't
second
want you to be
Friday.
out. I don't know what your garbage is going to look like without our sturdy bags, so I would deliver it for you.
Yeah, I'll throw it around, and they'll come see me.
Right.
The littering citation here in your hand. Coming to you here on the second Friday of the month of January, cold weather upon us, and one thing I wanted to ask you about, you are in the discussions here with the bomb threats that have happened in the city. Some charges have been posted now for some of these kids
Right.
that have done this. What's the inner feeling here on, are you too harsh, are you not harsh enough? I mean, do you make this sting so that other people don't try it, or you make examples, or are you just being humane, or whatever you want to call it here, with kids that are kids?
You know, a lot of that depends on, a lot of that's out of our hands. Once we send charges through, it's pretty much up to the DA's office and the judges, and maybe even a jury in that sense, what the ultimate penalty will be at the end. We have very little say in that. I mean, I think the community may have more say in that. We do our job, which is, make the arrest if an arrest is warranted, and leave the rest to the attorneys and the judges. It's a really good question. Some of these individuals have what we might call a checkered past, and are doing it to be, because they have delinquent intentions, mischievous or criminal intentions. Other ones are possibly doing it as a call for help, or maybe there's so many different ways that this could happen that I think we have to come to the bottom line of why it was happening, and how A, we can prevent it from happening in the future, B, how we can ensure that helping those that are attending the schools and those who have children attending the schools feel safe and secure with sending their children to school, and B, that there's some sort of accountability. That accountability might come in the form of counseling or community service. It might come in the form of a fine and jail time. A lot of that, I think, is going to be on a case-by-case basis and dependent on the individual and the circumstances that led up to this, and really maybe their level of cooperation throughout the investigation. Some individuals openly spoke and were apologetic and remorseful. Others weren't. So I had told one media outlet, I would never, this sounds bad, but I would rather somebody skip school than disrupt the education of everybody. If you truly don't want to be there, take your chances and walk out the doors and see if you're noticed or if we'll catch you. I mean, to that extent, because the other option, which was the one that was selected by a handful of kids here, was to, make this threat or make this, place this fear that led to, the cancellation of school, or parents choosing to keep their kids home from school because they were fearful of the safety and security of that truly don't want to be there. I'd rather them not be there, but don't disrupt it for everybody.
What kind of truancy laws are there now? I mean, I remember when I was young, and it's a long time ago, so I think things have changed here, because
Sure.
you used to be able to come and go at every door when I was in school.
Right.
Open campus, I mean, that would be unheard of in today's society at high school, where we'd
Right.
walk and come and go. When you didn't have a class, you could leave.
Right.
As opposed to being stuck in study hall. Now it's a lockdown. Well, I shouldn't say that in its entirety, but I mean, everything is secured now for obvious reasons. So what is the truancy rules?
Yeah, they still do have open campus for individuals who are, and I believe it's called the TOPS program, which you have to earn your way into having that open campus, which allows you to leave during your lunchtime or during a study hall and such. But as far as truancy goes, when, if you're, the way that the law is written is if you miss all or part of a day of school, and it's unexcused, it's looked at as truancy. Excused or unexcused could be looked at as truant because you're not where you're supposed to be, but there's a certain amount of, I guess, grace when it comes to, it being an approved dentist appointment, funeral, thing like that. But when it's unexcused is what, I guess, heightens our attention or heightens the school's attention, and then they bring that information to us, and we work hand in hand with the schools. And oftentimes, there was a time where, and I'm not exactly sure what it is right now, but there was a time where if you were either tardy or truant from a class, if you were in the hallway or hiding in the bathroom or just late getting to class, you're considered truant or tardy. If you would have 5 of those build up within a semester, then you would receive a ticket, which would cause you to go to juvenile court. And once you went to juvenile court, our municipal judge would make a decision. They may say, okay, well, if it happens again within the next 60 days, you're going to have to do 20 hours of community service and pay a $50 fine. Or they may say, if this has been habitual, they might say, okay, well, we need to do that right now and not give you that 60-day warning. If it gets to the point where somebody's just not attending school, I mean, we could refer them to human services because there's maybe some underlying issues or some issues that they need more than just municipal court for. But that's often dependent on those communications that happen between our school resource officer, the school administration, and the involvement of the parents and how involved the parents are and what their level of cooperation is towards getting their kids in school. When the kids are young, I mean, we would only write truancy tickets if somebody is 12 or older. We would send them to juvenile court if they're younger. If you have a 8-year-old that's not attending school, we put that on the parents, and we would write the parent a contributing to truancy citation, which then gets them into court and holds the parents accountable. But it doesn't happen right away. I mean, usually there's some efforts made by us, the school, to reach out to the parent, find out what's going on. Sometimes it's a transportation issue that they can't get their kids to school at the right time. Sometimes it's more a discipline issue. The kid doesn't want to go to school and they're struggling with how to do it, whether they're a single parent or they're a parent who maybe relies on their kids getting to school by themselves because they walk. And they're at work and they didn't know. So a lot of it is just starting with those communications and those opportunities to find out what the problem is and then work through how to solve the problem and make sure the child's not having their education impacted by these absences.
Talking with Marshfield Police Chief Rick Gramza, you can too, 384-2191, 384-2191. The bomb threats that have happened in the Marshfield School District has been on the minds of people, and just kind of how juveniles are handled here. And I am curious as to at what the break point is where law enforcement gets involved. I would think most of what you talked about should be a guidance counselor type of thing. But when you start talking court, now you're talking law, now law enforcement gets involved. Yeah. But do you get the word from the counselor then? This is somebody you need to go see, or?
Yeah, it kind of depends.
Or your liaison officer.
Yeah, it depends on the age of the child, maybe what the background is, if we know the family situation. And if we know the child wants to be in school, the parents are just maybe being delinquent and not getting their child to school. We've done home visits, which is, we'll go out to the residents. If a child has missed school a number of times and we can't get in touch with family, we'll go out to the residents, and we'll usually do that with either a school administrator or a social worker or a guidance counselor or multiple people. But with the plan of trying to problem solve why this is occurring. Sometimes it's a matter of somebody left the district and moved down to Chicago and they haven't re-enrolled their child, maybe because it's towards the end of a semester, towards the end of the school year, but they're just not attending school here in Marshfield. So it's just a breakdown in communication. We didn't know that they moved. Oftentimes it's, again, maybe an issue that the parent is having with the child, or that the parent is having with themselves and struggling with getting the child to school. But it is usually a multi-headed approach, with either administration, the guidance counselors, but it all depends. I mean, guidance counselors' jobs have really morphed over the years. It used to be kind of that truancy component was part of it. It's become more of a social work component and a career planning component. But again, that all depends on what grade level you're in. Obviously, you're not going to be doing career planning in second grade. But that's where they are more of, across the board, they're more of that social work component. If somebody is distraught or if they're struggling with something or they're being bullied or they're having difficulty with classes, the guidance is a good place to start. We often look at ourselves as school resource officers as a quasi-guidance counselor because we work so close with those guidance counselors, those advisors. But I think they're called academic advisors now rather than guidance counselors. But just having that connection and having that open dialogue is necessary to help with bettering the child's education and really their quality of life. And by having an officer in the schools like we do, and we've had for a number of years, it really just builds on that team approach. I mean, guidance couldn't do it all by themselves. School administration couldn't do it all by themselves, and we can't do it all by ourselves. But when we work together with the parents or the guardians, we've had more success than failures.
I guess that's the underpinning here of how we got to where we are. You mentioned people, kids that are you've had contact with before. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that every one of them is bad. I'm just saying that you kind of know, and there's an undertow of maybe non-parental involvement, or there could be situations that led them to think that, this was something that they could do. Mm-hmm. And, knowing these kids early on, you might have an opportunity to dissuade them. And that gets back to, do you throw the book at them, or do you, and that's something that comes back to knowing their situation.
Right, yeah. I mean, putting a 17-year-old in jail for this might not be the answer, but it might also convince somebody not to do it if they know that could be the end result.
It's, to me, hard to, and I looked at this even in adult court, mm-hmm. It's hard for me to justify ruining someone's life so that I can try to dissuade someone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's...
Collateral damage in the courts is not a good thing, I don't think.
Well, it depends. I mean, it depends on the situation, obviously. I've had a number of parents come up to me in the community or community members and say, is it safe to send my kids to school? Should I be looking at private school? Should I be looking at homeschooling? Well, you have to do what's in the best interest of you and your child, obviously, and that's a complete, I guess I would have those conversations with your child, and don't not include them in those conversations. Are the schools safe? Yes. Are they, could something bad happen in the schools? Absolutely, but something bad can happen at Walmart. Something bad could happen at this radio station. We have very little control over when somebody chooses to do something bad. The best thing we can do at times is to seek out that voluntary compliance of doing the right thing. A perfect society would be a society where individuals and citizens police themselves, and we're not needed. Obviously, that's non-existent. So we help citizens police and visitors police themselves. And sometimes we have to, at times it could be almost looked at as, okay, well, somebody's, going astray here, and you have to correct them. And sometimes I've mentioned it, with traffic enforcement. Sometimes you make a traffic stop and a verbal or a written warning is appropriate. Sometimes a ticket is appropriate. Sometimes arresting somebody is appropriate. And it all depends on the degree of the offense, the situation, how many people are impacted, the level of danger, if something went really bad, and how many, maybe what their past is like. That's why I said each of these situations within the school has been unique. Do you want to set an example, for your child as to, okay, this is bad behavior, but your level of discipline for your child, and, the worst thing you might have done as a parent is, ground your child for 2 weeks. The worst thing that somebody else has done is maybe taken their car away. The worst thing somebody else has done was shake their finger at them, but it's all maybe on the same offense. They're going to learn in different ways. But the best thing that if you have multiple children, you can say, okay, well, boy, I don't want my car taken away for 2 weeks. I'm not going to do that when I'm that age. So you more or less have set an example by your parenting style. In a lot of ways, what we do in the schools, working with the administration and the guidance is a different form of parenting, I guess. It's just holding the individuals, the students accountable to the rules and regulations that are in place for their best interest, whether they believe it or not.
Talking with Marshfield Police Chief Rick Gramza here, the second Friday in the month of January 2020. On today's Insight program, you can too, 384-2191, 384-2191. I don't know that you can give me a feel for this other than to ask, do you see this as a blip on the radar? We had a time when we had a lot of railroad crossing crashings too, and all of a sudden that came and went. And we all sit there and shrugged our shoulders and go, what the heck's going on?
Yeah.
And now we've got a situation where we had over within a month almost, bomb threats.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Within really, it was probably within about a week and a half. We had 3 different events, and I think there might have been a 4th one in there at some point. But, it ebbs and flows. I mean, did one result in another, and then the other one,
Was it a copycat, or are we...
Yeah, to an extent, but I mean, you could also look at it as, the copycats did the first one copycat it from maybe something they read in the paper or saw online or, through social media or, heard from a different school district. I've yet to, not saying it couldn't happen, but I've yet to hear of an active shooter that said, you better not go to school 2 weeks from tomorrow because I'm going to come there and show up with a gun and I'm going to, hurt people. They just show up and hurt people. I mean, that's their intent, is to cause damage.
But when they find it on their social media posts, there was some indication that today I'm going to do something, or next, you better not come to school Wednesday, because they have posted ahead of time.
Yeah, it's rarely written on the bathroom stall. It's rarely written on, the mirror in the women's bathroom. Don't come, or the bomb threat that says, there's a bomb in a black backpack that will go off at noon under the library today. Well, okay, if somebody wants to put a bomb off and underneath the library of the Marshfield High School, they're going to just put a bomb in there and have it go off. They're not going to warn people about it because that's not really doing the damage they want if it truly is a bomb. Not saying that couldn't happen. What they're doing is they're trying to get out of school and they don't want to be in school. That's why I said they should just leave then. I mean, I doubt when they left school or school was canceled that they hung out with every single person within the school. They didn't all just congregate at one place. I mean, they wanted to go just do their own thing. Well, I would tell them then just do your own thing and don't disrupt the education of everybody.
That's an interesting psychological component to this when you look at the detective work, which is how did they do it?
Mm-hmm.
And, were they specific? Did it seem, when you talk about the word credible threat, was it specific? And if it was, then there's a better chance it was credible. If it was just a lipstick on a mirror, it was mostly grandstanding.
Yeah, and then what's your risk reward component of that if time is not on your side in confirming that or denying, that that's a credible threat? I think each individual, what you believe is a credible threat may differ significantly from what I believe is a credible threat, but it's based on your life experience and my life experience and maybe our knowledge base surrounding, that information. And that's where we could always do better, not only as law enforcement, but as school officials is, I think we do a better job now than we did 5 and 10 years ago of communicating information out to students and staff and parents and the community as a whole. But we can always get better. I think the expectation is that we have perfect communication across the board. If we shared it within 10 minutes of learning about it, we should have shared it within 5 minutes. If we shared it within 5 minutes, well, we should have known that this was coming or seen it was coming or paid attention to how many thousands of social media pages out there where one of these warnings could have popped up. Well, a lot of information is sometimes known by students and parents, and it's just not shared with us either, to where we can actually evaluate it to see if it's a credible threat and to make a determination as to whether or not school should be canceled or whether or not there's something to be investigated prior to school taking place. So again, that's gotten better over the years, but it could still, it's an imperfect system to that extent.
You have so many avenues now of information.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, getting it out through the school text, and when you sign up for that as a parent, to get an immediate feedback, and then you have that component of, do we worry the public? Mm-hmm. Because you put that out there, suddenly, man, you got parents coming from all four corners here. They're on their way to the school at 100 miles an hour trying to get their kid. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing there. So you have to evaluate whether or not now is the time.
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges so one thing that we could have done better, we didn't want to make this bigger and more grandiose than it really was. So when the threat came through that we canceled school, that caused us to cancel school, we had just put out the threat had been made, and we were canceling classes at Marshfield High School. Well, we weren't specific about that threat because we didn't want to give it more weight than it deserved. But we knew it was obviously specific to the high school because it said a bomb in the below the library. But not sharing as much information as we could have caused a lot of people to question, okay, well, if this is an active shooter threat, are kids safe at other schools? Are kids safe at daycare? Should we be closing all the daycare? Should we be locking down? Should all the schools be locking down? Once we started hearing a little bit of rumblings, within probably 20 minutes of us putting that post out, we updated it and said it was a bomb threat specific to the high school. All the other schools are safe. All the daycares are safe. But we still had parents saying, well, if I'm picking up one child, I want to pick them up all. I want to pick all of them up. I want to go to the 3 different schools that my kids are at and have them all at home. Well, it's your prerogative, I guess, if you want to do that. But at the end of the day, it could be looked at as an unexcused absence because there's nothing wrong with keeping your kids in school at that elementary school or at the middle school, or even, there's no need to really pull them out of daycare. But I can see the concern, that heightened sensitivity to that fear of something happening. I can tell you that in the days following those bomb threats, the schools were never safer as a whole because we weren't focused as much on traffic enforcement and doing as many business walkthroughs as we were doing school walkthroughs and being present at the schools. And when we had downtime, we spent it around the schools, and we got out of our cars and we walked through the schools. And we actually, the last 3 days of winter break, the last 3 days before winter break, and before Christmas, we actually assigned 2 officers on overtime to the high school, and they were in uniform walking around the high school for the whole 8 hours. So, we actually had at the high school 3 officers, and our school resource officers, who are normally wearing plain clothes throughout the day, were wearing their uniforms. So just that extra presence, I can tell you the schools were never safer those last 3 days as they've ever been, at least in the last 22 years that I've been here. But still, that doesn't necessarily, sometimes that's not enough for the parent or for the child if they're truly fearful that something could happen. It's just a conversation that needs to be had, but also there needs to be a certain amount of trust that happens to what we're providing and the service we're providing not only the schools, but the efforts we're taking to keep the kids safe there.
Well, you kind of answered my next line, which is, what did you do in response to that? Mm-hmm. So, talking with Marshfield Police Chief Rick Gramza here on AM 1450 WDLB this second Friday in January here, and talking to him about the situation that it turned out to be, I guess you'd say nothing, but we sure have a lot of practice and protocol in place now and a lot more experience on what's going to happen if something does happen, not only as law enforcement, but as public.
Yeah, it's a changing world. There's things that, and I'm trying to, not look at it from a law enforcement perspective, but there's things that I would have never, but I guess every generation can say that there's things I would have never seen coming, or a response. I never saw life going this way. The fact that you actually have to lock, like you said, lock all of the doors of the school, and you have, funnel everybody through one entrance and exit.
My dad or grandpa would have said, "Excuse me, I'm paying taxes for that building. I can walk in there anytime I want to." No, you cannot.
Yeah, and I mean, it was probably, a very naive way to look at things, but that's how bad things happened, was because, it was looked at as a community building. I mean, when we had, there was a lot of discussion centered around that individual that they thought was a gunman at the UW, right around the same, time, right before winter break. And it was a complete misunderstanding. But again, there you have a state building, a university that wants to just open its doors to allow people in cold weather to still get exercise and walk the halls like they would at a mall or at a different, community building. And here's an opportunity to be one with the community and be welcoming, but yet based on this heightened sense of alertness or concern, some students did the right thing and reported what they thought they saw was a gun in somebody's pocket of somebody who didn't belong in the school. Well, they belonged in there because they were walking, but yet that whole heightened sense of fear and awareness and alertness caused them to think that they saw something that they truly didn't see. And when you try to do something good for the community, sometimes it can have, repercussions or a ripple effect that impact it in various ways. And I think that's what ultimately, you would hate to see them have to lock the doors and say no more walkers. But at the end of the day, I mean, if it's a safety and security concern for the individuals who are paying to be there, there should be they should have a voice in that decision too. But yeah, I mean, times sure have changed, and I think there was a time where churches stayed open 24 hours and you could walk in, and that doesn't happen anymore because then you started having thefts and vandalism and damage and vagrancy, and I mean just a lot of things from people taking advantage of what was kind of an open door policy. So that's changed to that extent. So usually things like that, of that degree or that significance, don't change just to change. I mean, it changes because something motivates it to change.
It's that component that irks me most about what you might consider terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's the carry-through if they actually did something,
mm-hmm.
but it's the ripple effect of taking away all of our freedoms
mm-hmm.
in the meantime that irks me the most, because there was a chance that maybe, or we could have, or we're trying to prevent, or and I'm thinking, as a kid, I come and go at school or at the university, I almost look at that as a swatting incident. It was unintentional,
right?
But it wound up being such that we're so heightened now
mm-hmm.
that we can't not take it serious.
Right. Yeah, if we don't take a situation that serious and something does happen, or if we had information, it's the whole risk management or risk mitigation, trying to reduce the level of liability and risk. And I know we're, liability fearful society now, but, everybody's fearful of being sued because you can sue anyone for almost anything. So with having that in the back of your mind and fearful and that concern of, okay, now the standard is you either knew something could have happened and you didn't do anything about it, or you should have known, because if you should have known that could have happened or that was the end result and you still chose to do nothing about it, then we hold you to a certain percentage culpable for whatever happened. So I mean, it's again the world we live in, and we don't have to like it, but I don't know how to change that. I guess I don't know how you.
We didn't get here overnight,
right?
And I don't know how we're going to get back. We've gone through that cafe door now, and it swings both ways, but it doesn't seem to be as easy to unlearn or change your attitudes toward people.
Well, and let's go full circle here now. There's bad people out there who do bad things, who have intentions of doing bad things for either a cause or for personal gain. Now, do we hold them accountable to set an example to hopefully dissuade others from being copycats and doing the same thing, which then causes our sense of security or heightened sense of awareness to go off the charts to an unhealthy level and become almost too hypersensitive to that? Or do you set the example for one or many and then hopefully dissuade it through, that, okay, well, I don't want that to happen to me. I'm not going to do that. It's a good philosophical decision or discussion.
It goes on everywhere all day, in every city in America here. 384-2191 is our number. Talking with Marshfield Police Chief Rick Gramza on today's Insight program, this second Friday in the month of January here on WDLB.
Being in the Army National Guard is about more than serving your country. It's about being there for your community when your neighbors need you most. The Army National Guard makes college affordable, and serving part-time can help you graduate debt-free. Do you want to stay close to friends and family? The Guard allows you to serve close to home. Serving part-time in the Army National Guard lets you have the life you want. Learn more by visiting nationalguard.com.
Sponsored by the Wisconsin Army National Guard. Aired by the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association and this station.
WDLB's Insight program for a Friday in January 2020. The new the new decade is here. Don't get too far ahead of yourself. It wasn't that long ago. It was change. We were having a look back here at through the decades on the change of when we thought the world was going to shut down with computers and what that meant at the time. Talk about alarmed, I don't know if all of this, what we've been talking about this program here, is leading to a boy with wolf. The proverbial, we're always on edge, and when something, you're either turning in people who have nothing to do with anything, as we've happened here in our city, or you just blow it off and go like the tornado siren's going off again, and It could be a leaf blowing around. Who knows? I don't know where you're in the thick of it here as far as being the public protector.
Right.
When do you react and how hard?
Well, that's the biggest thing is to, I don't want to say motivate, but to keep that sense of urgency in place and not to become complacent as officers. Because, although life was good back in Mayberry, we're never going to be in Mayberry, and I never want our officers to think that Mayberry. I don't want them to think that this is, downtown Chicago either. I think that there's a balance. I don't want them to be naive to think that what happens in Chicago couldn't happen in Marshfield. And that we might have more Mayberry days than not. But just to keep that, that even keel or that level sense of awareness, complacent or too relaxed, or, that could never happen here. We haven't had something like that happen in 30 years, and it shouldn't have even happened then, or it was blown out. Well, I guarantee you could pull up any major national news source, and a town that you never heard of had something catastrophic happen and they never saw it coming, or they saw that there was a potential for it coming. I think we all think, okay, well, we'll train for the worst and hope for the best. And if throughout your career you never have to pull your gun and fire it at somebody, some consider that a good career. There's other places where it's like, if I do that less than 5 times, it's a good career. Others are, but we're far beyond the keep your bullet for your gun in your front pocket in case you need to use it. So I think it's just keeping that, you don't want your officers to become complacent or bored, but you also don't want them to be so hypersensitive that they can't be approachable and be a part of the community. And, so it's a matter of just having those conversations and training and being prepared, and I think sharing out that information to the community, so we give the community a sense of comfort in knowing that, okay, the odds of this happening are probably pretty slim, but we're not naive to think that it could never happen. That's why we go around to the churches and the daycares and the businesses in town, and we teach them about active shooter and active threat and what a civilian response to an active shooter event looks like, and what we're going to do when we get there, just so that if it, God forbid, happens someday, it's something that A, we're prepared for, and B, that there's hopefully a sense of comfort in the community thinking, okay, well, they know what they're doing. Yeah, I hope it never happens, but at least they know what they're doing if it does happen.
Well, we went from duck and cover to shelter in place. The fear, the threat, the whatever may have changed over the generations, but it seems like there's something all the time that we're having to prepare for, whether it's an outside, as it was years ago, threat, or whether it's an inside threat now.
Yeah, I think it's almost a paradigm shift of your mind of what you have to do as an individual, because it ultimately comes down. We as police officers can't be everywhere at once. I would love to have an officer in uniform stationed at every single church on every Sunday, and to have one, I guess, in place. But then is it almost turning into a militant society at that point where we can't, as a society, you have to look at policing yourselves, and you see that in there was that church shooting.
Well, I was just going to say concealed carry and all of that, which goes on.
You see that in individuals that are preparing themselves and hoping they'll never have to draw their weapon on somebody, but if somebody is hurting other people and they can intervene, you look at we were out of state this last week, and we went to a church out in San Diego, and there was probably 3,500 people at that church service.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, if we had, and it got to be in my mind, if there was an active shooter at that place. Granted, there was 4 uniformed officers at that church, but if there was an active shooter at that place and there was no uniformed officers, how many would run, how many would duck and cover, or how many would charge this one individual? You have 3,500 people in the church, and I would hope that somebody would, you would just think, well, I might get hurt, I might get killed, but he's not going to kill 50 of us or 100 of us or 300 of us. We have 3,500 people that could rush. I'm pretty sure that within 3 seconds you could overtake this individual who has a gun. But again, it's a matter of thinking that through. We never want to think about having to put our children in that position. But if you have a cafeteria full of 300 teenagers and one person with a gun, the 300 teenagers would overtake that one person with a gun in a split second. But yet the fear and just it's just changing the way you think. We would never want to see any of our children get hurt, but they're going to get hurt if they're hiding under a table, or if they're all trying to get out the same door and they can't because you have 300 kids trying to get out one door and it's totally bottlenecked, or they're stuck, or they're blocking each other. And you're don't even have your face to the threat, you have your back to the threat, so you don't even know what's happening. So a lot of that is just having those good, healthy discussions with your children, with your coworkers, with the other parishioners at your church. It all depends on changing that mindset and moving forward from there, because the way that we've done it for years with some of the threats that are out there hasn't worked.
I find it interesting you call that in today's world a healthy discussion.
Mm-hmm.
How I'm going to get out of church when there's a shooter.
Well, but it is, because if otherwise you're in a sense of denial if you think it can never happen. And you're naive to think, even if it does happen, I'll figure it out at the time. Well, no, you're going to vapor lock, you're going to stress, and you're going to do what, most people do, and that's, duck and cover. Well, that's only as good as when you're next. So, but I think it is a healthy discussion. You plan for the worst and you hope for the best in that situation.
Talking with Marshfield Police Chief Rick Gramza here on this second Friday in the month of January 2020 here as we wind down our hour with you. Promotions and hires, have you had much within the department since I talked to you or throughout the year?
We have one individual who is on military leave, stationed out in, I believe he was out in Afghanistan. And he is now stateside, should be coming, he's having a medical procedure done that, and once that's completed, he'll be back working for us. So we're hoping in the next probably 30 to 45 days he'll be back, and kind of go through some retraining, because he's been gone from us for about 15 months. He will kind of fall into place and be the extra body that we lost when Lieutenant Larson retired in December. Other than that, right now we would be at then full staff. With Lieutenant Larson's retirement, we have a promotional process for a lieutenant's position that'll be happening probably in the next month or two. Once this is a good time of year to do that because we don't have a ton of things happening. Budget isn't until June or July. We don't have a lot of that end of the year things that we just get over. We have CIP planning coming up over the next couple months, but that isn't as time and
define that for people who don't know the acronyms here.
Oh, the capital improvement.
Yeah.
That's whenever we have large purchases. I think it's $50,000 processes or programs or improvements that we need to do for the a capital improvement thing would be an expansion to the police department if that happened. A capital improvement could be trying to redo some roads in town that necessarily weren't budgeted for, but were found to be in need of that or aren't in the current schedule of things. So, I mean, when you're having big dollar item things like that, there's a certain amount of money that the city has to pay for those big dollar items each year, and it's a matter of just prioritizing what those are. So that's coming up in the next probably month or two. But aside from that, that's really the biggest, as a collectively as a city, one of the biggest things that we're working on.
When you purchase large equipment or expensive equipment, that's 3 years into planning oftentimes, if not more.
Yeah, it's, there's a lot of things we have been talking about our garage expansion for probably 12, 15 years, and it still hasn't happened. And then we began talking about just the redoing of, the police department, the remodeling of the police department. But yeah, often it's a 5-year. The CIP, the capital improvement process, is a 5-year plan. It's like a 5-year financial plan of big dollar items. But there's a lot of things that are put into off years, which are kind of okay. Well, maybe 5 to 10 years we'll be able to do that, but it's just a matter of just planning for it.
All right. Well, I'm glad you stopped by. Good to see you again. When is the Johnny Cash tribute concert?
It's in May. I don't have the exact date, but it's in May. But I can bring that date next time we meet.
Any coffee and donuts coming up soon? Coffee with a cop?
Coffee, nothing scheduled, but we always have something that pops up, so I'll make sure we push that out through social media, and I'll let you guys know about it as well.
Okay. Well, good to see you again. Thank you for coming in and offering your opportunity to talk with the public here. Marshfield Police Chief Rick Gramza on this regularly monthly visit on the second Friday of the month here on AM 1450 WDLB's Insight program.